All right. Welcome to another edition of Shabbat Lounge. This is Matt.
And Jake here.
We're coming to you with one of our favorite things to do, and that is interview people.
That's right. And today we have Andrew from outside the camp. You may have seen him around. He does a lot of videos. And so we'll keep the intro quick and let him do some talking about himself. But any housekeeping items we need to clean up first for us?
No, we just always appreciate that if you are catching this, that you would share this with a buddy, share this with a friend, like it, subscribe, check out our all of the places. If you just Google Sabbath Lounge, you'll find us in every podcasting platform known to man that I know of, and YouTube and other places. And we just appreciate any attention that you give us, because we guess we need lots of attention, Jake.
We are very starved for attention.
Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
Just trying to get the word out about Yah. So, check out the website also. Lots of interesting things on the website. So you can go there or just check out some videos on the YouTubes and stuff. So,
and we've done this series of interviews, and we have a pretty lengthy list of people here recently, and we have another new one, and I'm going to ask Jake to introduce our guest. So Yep. This is somebody Jake told me about.
Right. So like I said, Andrew from outside the camp, and welcome to the channel, and it's good to have you.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me, brothers.
We appreciate you taking time to be here with us, and I know you had a busy day getting ready, and but we appreciate that that you're able to do that. And Jake has been watching your channel for a little bit, and he said you got to check this guy out. So here we are.
That's right. So basically, so for people that don't know what you do, why don't you give a rundown of kind of your information, where people can kind of catch your content, and a little bit about you.
Yeah, so my name is Andrew LeClair. My channel name is Outside the Camp, and what I'm doing is trying to, one, preach the gospel to all creation and teaching them to observe all things whatsoever Christ has commanded us to do, right? And so that's the Great Commission. That's what we're all supposed to do. And with that, there is also the necessity to hold our brethren accountable, right? And try to spark some conversation up with brothers that we love, to say, hey, there's some things that we're missing here, and so that we can get this revival to happen in the body, right? And so that's my goal, is to spark revival wherever I can do that, even not in a crusade, Billy Graham crusade format necessarily, but just one conversation at a time can spark revival in even just one more household. So that's kind of my goal. And so what we do is we do street ministry. I go and I do the Martin Luther, the modern day Martin Luther. Instead of nailing the 95 Theses on the door, I like to go into these churches and ask them if I can ask them some Bible questions and have a conversation about what is sound doctrine. What is Paul encouraging Timothy to maintain, that the church is ultimately going to let go of, right, and still maintain this identity of Christian. And so that's what I have these conversations about. And we agree initially that it's about, when it all comes down to it, we're talking about the commandments of God. This is the right behavior that we're supposed to walk out, that's ultimately going to be abandoned. And so once we get down to the nitty gritty and I ask certain questions like, okay, what about this commandment? What about this commandment? It all comes, what happens is we start to see that there's a problem right there before our very eyes, that this pastor who's genuine or seems to be doing the right thing is actually fallen into this category that Paul is warning Timothy that's going to happen. And the reason why I can expect that to happen most times is because this actually happened in my life as well. I was confronted with these issues, and it sparked revival in my life once I went on an investigation to see that these things truly, they are applicable to our discipleship and actually going to bring us closer to the Father. And so that's what I want to have happen. And so I also talk to just believers and unbelievers all around on the streets, whether it's on record or not. I'm having conversations all the time to try to inspire some revival to happen everywhere I go.
That's awesome. There was something you said there, spark spark revival. That could be, that seems like a mission statement or a motto or something. That seems like, I like how you said that.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't mean to say it in a fancy way, but that's really what it all comes down to. Is that's because that's what I experienced in my heart and home. That's the only way I could explain it, is revival. I was in a place in my Christian life where I just became stagnant, and I kept wanting counsel from my pastor, and I was like, what am I missing? And he would say these comments that were just like, they sounded like there was substance to them, but in all actuality, it didn't do anything for me, because he never defined what it actually meant. He would say things like, just rest in Christ,
Right.
just
It's like,
focus
well,
on
what
Jesus.
what does that even mean?
Yeah.
Like, I think I'm doing that, but
Right.
you can't just float out these platitudes and expect it to change a life. There's got to be some meat to it.
Exactly. So that didn't do anything for me, and so yeah, I needed more. And once I found out that there was things missing from our discipleship, I had like a Josiah, experience where I, metaphorically speaking, ripped my garment and said, "Oh my goodness, what in the world are we doing?" Why aren't these things being taught and applied to Christians? So that's what happened in my life, and that's what I want for other people.
That's one of the things that I appreciate about your channel, is your commitment to discipleship. It always kind of centers around, well, what are we actually discipling? Because a lot of times you, as with anyone in this walk, you get the that fiery darts of, oh, you're just doing that to be saved, right? And then when you've already set up the conversation, that's not the point. It's how do you disciple after the fact? And then somehow it always comes back to, they always kind of seem to think that you're talking about salvation by works. But that's one of the things I appreciate about your channel, is the discipleship centered focus on that. And then so why don't you go into a little bit more? You kind of touched on it, and go into kind of how you came to Torah, and how that, did your wife see this at the same time? Were you married at the time? That kind of thing, and kind of give us an overview of how that transition happened.
Yeah, it's a long story, so I'll give you sort of the Cliff Notes, which is also pretty
lengthy.
The highlights. So, 19 years old, I had came to Christ, and he just, a weight lifted off my shoulders. He forgave me. I was a completely transformed person. I was engulfed in the Word of God. For the first time, the Bible spoke to my life and was transforming my life. And I was married at the time as well, and had 2 children. And my wife knew who I was before I had this encounter with Christ, and after I had this encounter, she could just plainly see a transformed life, and it inspired her to walk it in the same manner. And so we together were growing in Christ, and we lived in Tennessee at this point, and we initially met each other and grew up in northern Michigan, but we lived in Tennessee, moved down to Tennessee when we were 18, lived there till we were about 19. That's when we came to Christ, moved back to Michigan. And when I was moving back to Michigan, before that, I had encountered some Facebook posts from some of my old friends, and it looked like they were having some sort of a Bible study in this church basement on Monday nights. And it was like 4 or 5 guys maybe. And so I contacted them, and I was like, wow, you guys are Christians now. Awesome. I'm a Christian. My wife's a Christian. We're looking to get plugged into a spot, when we get back up to northern Michigan. We're moving back. So wondering if we can, be a part of your guys' Bible study and just learn and grow with you guys. And they're like, yeah, come on up. And so that's what happened. And that Bible study, there's a lot of things that happened in between that. I'll touch on it for a second here. When I got up there, I was super passionate about the scriptures, and I seen that the rest of the guys kind of weren't, and I couldn't put my finger on exactly why at first, but I found out that they were doing some sort of like network marketing, and they were trying to sell people things, under the guise of being Christian, and hey, we're having a Bible study, come here, let's learn the Bible together, but we really want to sell things to you. And so I had a conversation with them, and I was young and zealous, even younger and zealous than I am now. So if you could imagine, it was it was fire. I told them, if you're gonna sit here and talk about the Bible, you need to be about the Bible. Why would you use the Bible in this way, guys? Come on, repent. And that's what happened. Thank the Father. It's what happened. These guys they put their heads down and they said, yeah, you're right. And so they actually started to grow, and they were passionate about learning the scriptures. And what happened was, all of us who were very similar, very close to the same age, and had similar reputations in our small town, what had happened was the people who were also of the same age group, they started seeing, because we would live stream these Bible teachings, and they would be like, who are these hooligans that once were stirring up, trouble in our community, and now they're talking about the Bible and they're so passionate about it. And so a lot of people started coming, and it happened to where there was like 50 to 70 people every Monday night coming to
So
this
you're
Bible
stirring
study.
up a different kind of trouble now.
Yeah, stirring up trouble for the Lord.
Good.
And it was cool. I mean, people were growing, people were coming and receiving Christ, and there was actual discipleship going on. And, as best as we knew how to go about teaching that and instructing it and exemplifying it. But also there was, this idea that you shouldn't have a novice in any form of leadership. And I think that touched, that did have a negative effect on all of us, in the sense that there was some pride involved. There was some just not so good situations to where I could see, looking back now, I shouldn't have been in any leadership position. But what was cool about that was it was a good learning experience, and
Right.
I was able to have some sort of background in leadership and teaching roles and public speaking and all these things because of those instances. But looking back, I think that was a big problem. I think the pastors should have looked at all those young men and said, hey, before you get up there and teach, we should have maybe a year or two of just learning the Bible. But it was good. I think they saw young men passionate about the Word of God, and they said, get up there and just go talk about it. And, people are coming, they want to hear it too. So it was kind of like, this is a good thing. But after a while, there was some organization that needed to happen. And so what happened was the pastors took all of us young men, and they said, here's, and they did kind of just what I just mentioned should have happened. Eventually they said, hey, we're going to have this training. It's called Elders in Training. You guys are going to learn how to be elders of a church. We need to teach people to be able to replace us, essentially, which is it's a good thing, so we want you guys to be a part of the what happens behind the scenes, in the office with us, and learning biblical principles on how to, deal with conflict in the church, or, this event's coming up and how do you help us organize it, all the teaching roles and all that jazz.
Right.
And so we were able to
Because
learn.
Stop you there
Go
real
ahead.
quick, just because I think that's an important point. Because I think nowadays, what you're describing, the passing on of leadership, I think is pretty rare from what I see. And a lot of people, from what I gather, want to hold on to power as long as possible and never want to pass it along. And that's when you get into, well, Yahweh can't work unless it's through me. So now I've got all these different churches I've planted, and now it's got to be me. It's all about me and what my efforts, what they bring to the kingdom. So it's
Right.
it's real encouraging to hear that there are places that are trying to pass that on to the next generation.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you have churches that they have these big name pastors, and once they pass, the community starts to fizzle out, and it's not as big as it once was. And it's like, were you guys really here for the community and the sound, discipleship doctrine, and or was it just for this man? You know what I mean?
Right.
So yeah, I understand what you mean. And so I am thankful. There's a lot of things I'm thankful about these pastors that used to be over me. So that was where they had us, and that. So for 5 years, I was a part of this non-denominational church in a functioning leadership role, and so a lot to be learned, a lot that I did learn. And I mean, I was already operating in evangelism. I was going out on the streets. I was doing like the Ray Comfort type interview style, where I'd ask them if they're a good person, then prove that they're not
Right.
by the commandments, and so it was really good. It really taught me a lot. And honestly, I really respect Ray Comfort, because he's actually one of the ones who helped me come to this understanding of Torah, because he started sowing these very biblical principles about the application of the law what our view of the law really should be as Christians, and that changed my understanding of how I should read the scriptures and think about the law entirely. You know, the Torah, the law of the Lord is perfect, converting the soul. What is it actually that converts the soul to Christ and makes the gospel make sense? It's when we see that we've fallen short of a holy and righteous God according to his commandments. It makes perfect sense. His
Yeah.
commandments are his ways, right? It's his behavior. And so when we transgress the commandments, we're actually falling short of who his character is, that we should
Right.
be in the likeness of. And so all these things made sense to me. And fast forward 5 years, right? I've been there for 5 years, and I was at this point stagnant. Like I was mentioning earlier, I was stagnant, and I didn't really know what's next. You know, I was operating evangelism, but I was going now in this slope downwards very slowly. And it was because there was a lot of things I couldn't define. You know, there was this wall, and I couldn't put my finger on what it was, but it was making me in a stagnant position, which is not good, because then you only are going to go down. And
Right.
so what had happened was, you know, eventually I told the leadership, I'm like, you know, I'm not going to be in a teaching position right now, because I just don't feel like what I feel like I need to do some learning and growing right now, and I need to get things in my household in order. I need to make sure that everything's good right now, before I get back into leadership. And honestly, I couldn't even figure out some content to even give them, you know, in a sermon, because I was just like so stagnant. So much searching that I was trying to do. I did not know what the problem was here. And so I'm at my job, which was a CNC machine operator. And so I'd have like hours of cycle time where these CNC machines would just be, the program would run, and it would cut this metal stock piece, right, for hours, and I would just be sitting there reading my Bible. And so, you know, the Father really had me in this, what I call an incubation period, where he's just preparing me for something, and I had no idea what it was, but he was just like getting me in the Word and soaking it up. And while I was doing that, I you know, after I'd come home, and my wife she's into this. A few years ago, she was selling these products called It Works, and it was like these wraps to help you lose weight, and you know, it was just a way for her to make a little extra cash, and you know, it was fun for her. But when she did that, she was adding all these different friends all around Facebook, so she could, you know, get the product out there. And she added a bunch of Torah observant people on accident. And so she was seeing these posts from all these different people, and it was interesting to her, right? It was sparking a lot of investigation and a lot of questions for her. And she started asking me these things, and she didn't like do a deep dive into the scriptures and like try to really wrestle with the scriptures. It was just basically she was questioning these things, and she verbalized that to me and said, you know, hey, husband who's been in leadership in this church for a while, he should have a good answer for these. Hey, you know, why don't we keep the Sabbath day? Why do we eat things that the Bible says not to eat? And I gave her the regular of what you would hear from people that I chat with all the time, right? Well,
fire was hotter back then.
Fire was hotter. You know, it didn't used to be as hot as it is today.
Oh yeah, it's hotter now.
Fire just, you know, temperature was lower. But no, it was you know, well, Peter's vision, you know, Jesus brought a new law. It's all about Jesus now. It's not about the law. But like, as I was saying those things, she also had like more questions, and it was not like her trying to have a rebuttal. It was she had a genuine question about just trying to understand my answers.
Right.
And it would be, she would kept drawing it out of me, and I would be just left there with nothing. And also in the back of my mind, there was those seeds planted that Ray Comfort said of, you know, this is the law, you know, the law of the Lord. It's the moral law, you know, the 10 commandments, and the Sabbath is in those 10 commandments. So why isn't it moral? And I'm having this huge dilemma now.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, I don't know. I'm not really sure how to answer this. I don't know what to do. Maybe I'll just go to my pastor and I'll ask him. He should have the answer for it. They've dealt with this, you know, he's been to seminary. He's understood church history. They've been through this. So he's got the right answers. So he had a little bit more of an answer, but it still, you know, maybe it sufficed for me at the moment. So I went back and told Rachel, because honestly, internally, I didn't want these things to be true either. That's just the fact of the matter. I didn't want them to be a part of my discipleship. I didn't want to have to do them. not only because it would be somewhat inconvenient for my life, right? It's my life. No self-denial in my life that I should have, but it's my life. But it was also the fact that it was not that popular, right? It's just not that you don't hear about the people doing these things unless you're in these circles, right? And so there's always these pulls pulling you away from the truth, right? Inconvenience, not so popular. This is going to cause some deep study that I'm going to have to embark on to answer this question. So it's easier just to give them the mantras you hear in church, So
yeah, because kind of if I accept this, that is going to have all these ramifications. And if I'm going to start saying that I believe this, then that means I'm going to have to start doing this.
Exactly.
That's a tough place to be.
But that's what it means to count the cost.
Right.
That's what it means to count the cost. So it would be consistent with being a disciple of Christ to count the cost and say, yeah, I might have to sacrifice a lot, maybe, but is it worth it? Right? Because it's the truth. And that's what you have to ask yourself. And that's what I had to ask myself eventually. So I relayed those answers for my pastor back to Rachel, my wife, and she again had more questions. I would relay those questions back to him. I was like the middleman, right? I was trying to just stay out of this and just help. Hopefully my pastor can figure this out, and eventually what had happened was my wife was so unsatisfied with these answers that she was actually more confirmed in this position of saying these things are still valid. And so what had happened was I said, Pastor, she told me she's going to stop eating pork. She's going to stop, buying it or, feeding it to her kids. And she's going to start keeping the Sabbath day. So when I told him that, he said something along the lines of, oh, your wife is trying to bring you under a curse. It's no longer an optional thing. It's one of those things where she's saying, no, it's a sin if you don't, how dare she, it was kind of this was kind of the tone. She not in those words, but this was the tone. It was like, this is out of order. You need to, here's his advice. Okay. He said, here's what you need to do, Andrew. You need to go to the store, get your bacon, get your shrimp, get whatever you want to eat. Cook it up in your house in front of your wife and kids and eat it. And so you can display to your kids. And by the way, the whole time this pastor was giving me advice, it was all under the banner of unity, keeping the peace, keeping unity. These questions, they can cause disunity and all these things. And so he's giving me this advice. Go get what you want, cook it up in front of your family, eat it, so you can display what true Christian liberty really looks like. You can demonstrate this is mom's conviction, and that's okay. And this is my conviction. This is my position. I don't have that conviction. I can eat whatever I want because of Christ, and that's the beauty of Christian liberty. And so there was like this red flag that went up in my mind. I'm like, wait a second, are you even married, first of all? Do you know what's going to happen if I do that in front of my wife?
But I was going to say, it sounds like he's trying to tear your family apart to keep unity in the church.
Yeah.
If I tear his family apart, the church will stay in peace.
It's wild. And so, and by the way, this pastor is still a dear friend of mine, by the way. And we disagree on a few things, right? But I still consider him a brother. He's still a very genuine, humble man. But this is what surprised me, because we had been on the front lines of ministry so many times together and had dealt with so many different things. But in this case, he didn't come off as humble to me. He didn't come off as a vessel of the Holy Spirit. So this didn't sound like the Spirit of Yah to me when he gave me this advice. And that's why a red flag came to my mind. And because I'm thinking, well, he just said that it's okay if she does that, right? So why is it now that she's trying to bring me under curse? Because she's saying what the Bible says it actually is a sin, right? I guess I'm not understanding. And so I didn't do that. Thankfully, I didn't go along with his advice. But that sparked that in and of itself. Again, the reaction, the responses, that sparked a investigation on my part. I said, I need to figure this out. I need to internalize these truths. I need to make sure. And I really struggled with this, guys. I mean, I really deeply struggled with these issues. It bothered me so much to the point where, I mean, I would have anxiety attacks sometimes trying to figure this out. And I mean, just when I started hearing the positions, right, I prayed so many times, Father, if this is the way you want me to go, you want me to go down this path, I will fight for you. I will do exactly what you want. I will preach this and I will teach it to other people. But if it's not, I will adamantly fight against this, but I need to know what side you want me to be on. Where do I go? Because I'll fight for either one because of how much it's bothering me. And so what had happened was I'm continued to read the word. I was listening to some of the channels that my wife had suggested to me. First, I just really needed to relook at these scriptures, and I was reading Charles Spurgeon's commentaries, and he took what I later found out, some of the same teachings from the Epistle of Barnabas, which is like this Gnostic kind of approach to the dietary instructions, that they're not, it's not literally unclean to eat these things, but the Lord is trying to teach you that, if it doesn't split the hoof, then it has slippery hooves, and you don't want to have a slippery life, and slip into sin, and all these different, metaphors that, I mean, it's kind of creative,
it's interesting,
but it's not the application of it in its entirety, right? It's a literal commandment, abstain from these animals to eat.
Yeah.
And so I would go up to Rachel and be like, see, I mean, this makes perfect sense, Rachel. and she'd be like, yeah, but Andrew, you're gonna take whatever side you want to be true, and that's what's gonna happen. You need to know what does the Lord want me to do, and look at this.
Sometimes it's real hard to know if you're picking a side because that's what you want to hear, or if it's actually if you're actually going the right direction. Sometimes that's real hard to discern.
Exactly. And you can be the most humble and well-read individual in the scriptures and still have this problem and not even know it, not even recognize it. That's why it's darkness. That's why it's blindness, right? And so it led me to this deep investigation, and I concluded that wow, this does make sense. These things actually, it makes far more sense. And I remember talking to atheists and agnostics and evolutionists, and I'm like, when they had a question, it would bother me if I didn't have a logical, simple answer that made sense, and I would go back and look at it. And so in this case, when those answers came up from the Torah communities, like 119 Ministries and a lot of different channels that I was listening to, Corner Fringe Ministries, a lot of these teachings really resonated with me, and I was like, this makes sense. This makes absolute sense. And so I was excited when I really came to the understanding that these things are applicable for our lives. It revolutionized my life. That I could put my finger on what exactly was wrong, what this wall was in my life. It was that growth that he wanted me to come closer, that the church was saying, no, these things are a curse. And that's where it was, right? And so it sparked revival in my heart and my home. We started doing the feast. We started keeping the Sabbath, and I was reluctantly keeping the Sabbath because I was still even though I was convinced that it was true, mostly, it takes a while for you to actually be 100% confident in that this is what the Lord wants you to do. Mm-hmm. But I kept the Sabbath, and I was afraid that I was like, am I actually going to be under a curse for keeping this today? I still, as I was walking in these commandments, I still in the back of my mind, I was like, is it true though? Am I going to actually be under a curse? I don't know. Either way, I was learning, I was growing. He was helping me to walk in Torah, and I was excited about it. And I didn't want to go back to my pastor until I had a good answer for these things. And so I finally did. And I was excited. I was like, he's going to know that these things do applicable. He's going to be excited too.
Yeah. It's funny because like when you're talking about Ray Comfort and how he does things, and it's because all the things my experience, all the things they were teaching me in church was that these are good things. You need to keep the commandments, right? And all this stuff. So it's like, oh, well, obviously all the things you're telling me line right up with, if I just walk out the things you're telling me, it leads to this. Right. So obviously if I just tell them, they'll see it, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It should be super simple. I mean, we've been talking about this for a while, right? The commandments are good.
Yeah.
And that's not how it worked out though. It wasn't, obviously, as you can imagine. Yeah, it's unfortunately how it usually happens, but there could be an excited pastor out there. Yeah. Somebody learned this and their pastor was like, wow, I never thought about it that way. That's something I should look into. But that's not really what happened. It was like, oh no, Andrew, she sucked you in too, kind of thing. And it, for a while, he didn't obviously let me back into the leadership role that I had, at one point stepped out from. And at this point I was like, I have some things I'd like to share, and that was, not initially, but that came up later. And I quickly learned that he didn't want me in a leadership position anymore. And so I just had kind of conversations with some of the people that I had gotten close to for 5 years, right? And these are still my people. These are still brothers and sisters, and I can have conversations with them, even though I don't have the pulpit. And so it got to a point though where I was looked at as the wolf. I was looked at as somebody who was just trying to disrupt what Christ was doing in this church, and it really, what happened was, I mean, we fizzled out. I'm not saying that I looked at them, I said, I'm done here and all these things, but there were so many conversations that happened behind closed doors that it was apparent to me that where I was going was not welcome here. Let's just put it that way. That's just how it ended. And it was interesting to me because all the conversations that I had behind closed doors, I would have genuine questions and really sound rebuttals to their responses. And it still wouldn't, they would even acknowledge that it was a good response and it made sense biblically, but they would still just argue. They would still argue. They did not want to see it. And so what I wanted to do after that was I was like, why are people, even these brothers that are so close to me, why are they so okay with people not hearing their responses? Why do they only want to do it behind closed doors? Why do they want to keep me away from talking about these things? Why don't they want people to hear
So they would
them?
have these conversations with you behind closed doors or amongst themselves?
Yeah.
Okay.
So my former pastor, there was an elders team, but all the elders had concluded they didn't want to talk to me. And which was weird to me because I'm like, if I have a problem, right? If one of your congregants has a problem, you're supposed to go before the elders and talk. You're supposed to be able to go before the elders and talk about it, right? And so none of the elders didn't want to chat. They said, we understand what he's where he's going. And, I don't think there's any need to have that conversation, but that's not really how church leadership works.
Yeah, that's weird. I don't get there's such a disconnect because they probably also would teach once saved, always saved. But now you're not saved, quote unquote, or whatever their opinion.
It's at least how they're treating me.
Yeah, because if they still thought you were saved, you'd be a sheep they'd be going for. They'd go out to bring back this sheep that's gone astray instead of casting him out. That's a not saved position.
Right. And it could have been a number of things. It could have been the pastor and some of the people that I've been talking to basically had been convinced that I was a lost cause. There's no changing my mind now. He's obviously he's sold. This is what he's going. This is the direction he's going, and there's nothing that we can do or say to stop it. So you might as well just ignore him. So this thing doesn't, he doesn't gain any momentum. If we just don't give him any sort of platform or conversation, then what is he going to do? And so I just felt like, no, this is so revealing that Yah showed me these things and what has happened. Look at the fruit of my home. Like we're digging into our Bible like we never have before. And we're learning so many things that are just joyous. Right. And they're so great. Tabernacles, Passover, you're learning new things about the gospel in and of itself that you never understood before. There's got to be something here. There's no way he's going to make me leave the church, learn all these things, and never tell anybody, right? And so what had happened was, long before this, me and my wife had this understanding, this call, this pull. We felt like we were supposed to go into full-time ministry at some point, and we didn't know what that looked like, didn't know how it was going to go about. But around the same time was the COVID era, right? And so when I was coming to Torah, when my wife was coming to Torah as well. And so what had happened was at my job that I was talking about earlier, we fell under the first mandate for some reason. I think it was because we were under government contract. We were making military defense equipment. And so they were somehow, we fell in some sort of category of federal employees, even though we weren't. But we also had, in this shop, there was like 20 to 30 people, but they had 3 facilities in Michigan. So all added up, there was like 100, which was the other criterion to say this is what the mandate is going to have to happen, right? And so the mandate came out, and I said no, and I had been there for over 7 years, and so they said, well, okay, here's your last day. Sorry, this is what they're making. They're forcing our hand. Sorry, we don't want to let you go, but this is what's going to have to happen. And so it made us do some real thinking about what's next in our life. And what we came to the conclusion of was like, maybe the Lord is just saying, trust in me, rely on me, because I had a really good job at that point. I had a good hourly wage. I had a nice home. I had 2 vehicles. I had all my insurance for me and my family, health insurance, dental insurance, all of it was paid for. I mean, it was good insurance. I didn't have to pay a dime for it. My employer paid all of that every month. And so to everybody's mind, to leave this job would be absolutely, it would be stupidity, for lack of better terms. You would be throwing your life away. You'd be throwing a good career away. And so, but we had in our mind, okay, obviously there's nothing we can do. We have to do something, right? To find a new job. But what happened was, in between that time of us trying to figure out what's going on, that got overturned. The mandate got overturned, and my employer said, "Whew, okay, hey, we're cutting that." And it was pretty close to the deadline, so we were pretty happy. Like, okay, cool, okay, keep my job, And so this was a couple years later, right? I'm still working there, but what we had talked about in the meantime was, okay, we're still here. That's great, but can I actually rely on this employer? Can I rely on this job? Because just from one thing that happens, I could have it all taken out from under us at some point, and we could be without an answer. And so we had to conclude that ultimately the Father is the one who sustains us. He's the one that takes care of us. And maybe this is the time we're going to full-time mission work. Maybe we sell the house while the market is the way it is. And that's what we did. 2 years, it was like a year or 2 later, I was still at the job. We sold the house, and Rachel was looking at some full-time RVers that would just go do vacation mode with these RVs. They would live in them full-time all around the country, and people would, like, for no reason, fund them just to go and eat good food at restaurants.
Just go party.
Just go party. And I'm like, well, wait a second. Like, if we go out and do actual mission work, full time, living in a camper, I'm sure there were people that would want to support that. Why wouldn't they? And so we just trusted that if we sold the house, bought a camper, bought a truck, and went on the road doing full time mission work, that the Father would bring people to support what we're doing. And so what we did was we sold the house, and we used the profits to buy the camper, buy the truck. No financing whatsoever. We were able to pay for them both, and thank Yah. And we invested in a membership through 1,000 Trails, and they have sites all around the country, so we can stay up to 3 weeks at a time at some of these campgrounds. And if we stayed in Florida or here in California, where they have a lot of those, we can bounce back and forth an hour or so between them, 2 hours, 3 hours, and just bounce around, stay here for a long time.
Yeah.
And so the goal that we saw ourselves making was that we want to go to every state and do some form of mission work, right? Sow seeds wherever we can, wherever the Lord wants us to be and what he wants us to do, that's what we're going to do. And so that happened. And we said, Lord, if you don't want us to do this, don't sell the house. He sold the house. Everything lined up perfectly. We got everything, invested a lot of bills prior so that we could have this good jump start to be able to do this, right? And so that's what happened. And we've been doing this for 2.5 years, and it's been opportunities have been slowly growing, and we're developing a lot more formats on how we can reach people and have these conversations. And that's our story. That's our mission work. And so here we are now, and he's just, the opportunities are blowing up. I'm finding better and more ways to have these conversations with people, and a lot of people are being affected by it. So it's a Yah thing, and he's brought supporters to be able to help us to continue to do what we're doing. So
yeah,
that's an incredible story.
Yeah, that's incredible. It's hard to top that. I'm like, all right, well, it's been great talking to you. I don't know how to top that. So that's a really good. Well, something that you said that I wrote down. I know exactly what you're talking about with those atheists, because I worked with an atheist whom I really grew to enjoy his company. Everybody else found him annoying and abrasive. But I liked him because he asked, like you said, he was very logical. And he would say things to try to rattle me. And when it wouldn't rattle me, then he's like, huh, that's interesting. I've never seen, usually other Christians get really rattled when I say this, whatever it was, and he'd have these triggers, and it really intrigued him, and we ended up having some really good conversations. And of all the people I worked with, we'd go out to lunch or something, and he would ask, he's like, "Hey, I'm going to order this. I know that you can't eat that, but if that is super upsetting and offends you, I will not do it." And I'm like, I was, and since he's an atheist guy, I always was like, I really appreciate you asking me that, but I mean, you're free to eat whatever you want. But when I'd go out to eat with other Christian people, I think they would do it to spite me. They didn't care. They would order that. And anyway, that was just a real interesting journey for me. And then when you're talking about COVID, if I remember right, Governor Whitmer, was that the governor of Michigan? And kind of renowned for being a hammer on that COVID business. So yeah, it's like a miracle you survived that. So that sounded terrible, the way they locked all that down.
Yeah, it wasn't bad for her husband, though, I hear.
Not if he could go on his boat trip to up at the cabin or whatever.
It was wild.
No, that's good. And you kind of touched on it, but maybe elaborate a little bit more about what drives you to do what you do.
Yeah, it's a number of things. One, it's my love for the Father. Ultimately, right? I'm grateful for what he has done in my life and my family's life to transform me from just a dirt bag to someone he can use for his glory, and just bringing me so many blessings and joy into my life when I didn't deserve it, and I still don't deserve it. And then also obviously just love for my neighbor. That's what it all has to stem from, and what ultimately drives me. But to go a little bit more, specifically touching that stem from those things. Also, I don't want to stand before my master and hear him say, like, I gave you the ability to go teach these things. I gave you what was life changing for you, and you didn't want to share that with other people. You knew that I was an austere man. You knew that I was harsh, is what he's saying. I gave you these things. I had an expectation for when I gave you these things of what you would do with them, and you disappointed. I don't want to hear that. And so I just want to do something. I want to be able to take risks. I think that a lot of people aren't willing to do that, and they lose out on so many opportunities in so many ways that the Father can use them mightily because they're afraid to take risks. And I just didn't want to be at the end of my life and say I was afraid to take risks, because I just had this drive. I wanted to go do something for the Lord, and that's what I decided to do. So many different times I look back and I failed at how I was going to come across to somebody, or how I communicated a message that I really wanted them to know. But that's usually when people will just give up, right? Just because, this isn't for me. I failed, and I'll just wait for the other person to do it successfully. That's not how he works with us. There's times when we're going to fail, and we got to be able to learn from those things and still continue to do what he's called us to do for his glory. And so that's what drives me, is I don't want to stand before him empty-handed and say I just didn't want to do it, Lord. I was afraid. And it's just to know it's my responsibility as his servant, as a servant to my neighbors, to do exactly what I'm doing, to serve them.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. That's excellent.
You kind of touched on this one too. Maybe a little bit more specifics if possible. How did you know that this is what Yah had planned for you and your family? Because a lot of times we'll, hear what we think is from Yah, and maybe not necessarily know if it's just kind of like we talked about earlier, if it's, my flesh kind of wants to do this, or am I putting words in Yah's mouth when I'm taking this direction with my life? So kind of talk maybe a little bit how you kind of determined this is Yah's path for you and not your path for you, and kind of how you collaborated with your wife on determining that for your family.
Yeah. Are you talking about the ministry or just the coming
Yeah,
to Torah in general? Okay. Yeah, the ministry. Yeah, it touches on what I was just talking about, and I think the same answer can go into that one as well. Is obviously we see from the scriptures that Jesus says, "Follow me, and I will make you to become fishers of men." That's just a result of following Him, right? That's how you know you've been with Christ, is you want to seek and save that which is lost. That's His heart. And so wherever you see that, wherever you see darkness, wherever you see blindness, you want to turn on the light, right? Because that's happened to you. And so the reason why I knew that He wanted me to do what I was doing is, first of all, when I seen that there was a gaping hole in what we understand as the religious system today, right? The religious establishment of our day. I seen the gaping hole, and there needed to be a light switch that needed to come on, and because it happened with me, it needs to happen in many different ways with many different people. And so I could be used now to make that light switch come on, to be able to give the information necessary for them to understand true discipleship, how to walk out faith in Christ. And when I saw that gaping hole and seen it specifically within the pastors, right, that this is coming from the pulpit, this deception is coming from the pulpit, I realized I had to have these conversations with pastors, just like I had with my pastors previously. And the reason why I knew that it was from the Father and not me is because I can assure you, I have no joy. I take no pleasure in going to pastors and talking to them about things that they really don't want to talk about and telling them things they really don't want to hear. I don't like that. There's a lot of, many times, every single time I go and talk to a pastor, I'm out in the parking lot and I'm praying, Father, please help me. Give me the words. Please just use me. I don't want to be here. I don't want to do this. I'd rather be at home with my family, right? But this is what you've called me to do, is to just spark some sort of revival with these questions, because somebody out there is going to listen to these responses and be more confirmed to this position, just like I was and my wife was when they heard the response of my pastor. And so the reason why I like to get it on video is because I've had too many conversations with pastors off camera where they will agree that these things are reasonable, they're consistent with the scriptures, they make sense, even going so far as saying you're probably right. But their conclusion is, without saying it, is, I just would lose my congregation, or, I can't do that, and so when I realized that there was something that pastors were hiding regarding this, that's when I was like, this needs to be exposed. This needs to be on camera so that people can hear these responses and they can determine for themselves why this is the case, right? And I'm not saying every pastor is trying to hide these things, right? A lot of them genuinely believe this is proper doctrine, this is scriptural. And so they'll come out with it, and then there I am with the questions, and they may have to scratch their head and say, I don't know. And so that's why I know that this is what the Father wanted for me, is because all along he had been preparing me for some form of ministry. And again, I was already operating in ministry. I was already trying to challenge the church to be more intentional, to go out and do something, right? But the Father gave me more tools to be able to direct them, to say, hey, this is what He's done for me. It's helped me. I want that for you. And here's what you need to do, right? Here's what the scriptures say. And so that's why I know that this is from Him.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. That's powerful. That's I appreciate you sharing that with us about praying, about going and talking to those folks. And I was playing some clips while you were talking, of some of these people and some of these places you've been, and when people watch these, you'll see some of the reactions some people have. And this particular gentleman here, he was very calm, cool, and collected. In fact, he was intrigued by what you had to say. And, there are some of those out there that can listen and kind of take it in. They may not agree with you, but they don't lose their mind. And so it's always interesting, when people just lose their mind and get so mad. And I think the reason that happens, in my opinion, is when I've had that happen, it's like there is something that they know is true in what you're saying, and they're just really conflicted. And instead of working on it and trying to figure it out, they just get mad And kind of what you even talked about on your journey, I think we all go through that at some point when you first start hearing this truth. I think it is normal to be angry about it and unsure. And, that's just part of, reconstructing your faith as you go through that.
Absolutely.
It's that pricking of the conscience kind of situation.
Yeah.
So you mentioned, so how do you kind of gain audience with these pastors? Like, I don't want you to divulge all your secrets or anything like that, but it's just like, what are they expecting when you come talk with them?
Yeah, no, there's no secrets. I'm pretty simple about it, and if they have further questions, I'll go into it. But I don't feel like I have to go in there and I'll tell. Okay, this is how I do it, and then I'll tell you what people have said I should do, and I'll tell you why I don't do that, or I don't feel the need to do that. But all I do is I walk in there with my tripod, and it's after the service. And the reason why I don't go to everybody's service also, this is a question I get not regularly, but I've got it a few times. Why don't you just go to their service? Is because I could go to one church, go through their whole service, and then at the end of it, I can say, hey, would you want to do an interview? And he could say no. And then I'd have to go to the next pastor down the street and explain to him why I didn't go to his service. Right. So I just don't go. But I look at where the services are. Wherever I park, I'm looking for fishing locations, right? And so one of the fishing locations is the churches. And so I'll look for when their service ends, and I'll meet them at the door, right? I'll go in. There's a lot of people out. They're leaving, right? I'm saying hi. And someone will usually approach me and say, hi, can I help you? And I'll say, yeah, I'm actually looking for your pastor. I have a YouTube channel, and I go around and chat with pastors and believers and unbelievers. And with pastors, I ask them certain, Bible questions. What is sound doctrine? What is a false prophet? I'm checking on the state of the church. Paul said to Timothy that a time will come when they will not endure sound doctrine. So I just want to make sure that that's happening. Is your pastor available? And so they'll be like, oh yeah, he's over here. And so, and then the pastor will come meet me, and I'll go through the same spiel, and he'll either say, yeah, let's go. Yeah, you want to go back here, or would you want to go over there? And I'll say, yeah, it doesn't matter, wherever you feel most comfortable. Or he'll say, no, I don't have time. You want to reschedule? And I'll say, yeah, here's my card, and just shoot me an email and let me know when the next available time is for you. Now, half the time, actually 99% of the time that happens, I don't get a call back, because what they do is they go look at my channel and they're like, yeah, I don't know. I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
I have had somebody look at my channel and actually follow through with the interview, which is very respectful.
Yeah.
But usually they don't ask any further questions. So they take it back there, and that's where it all goes down. I asked them. So, like I said before, Pastor Paul tells Timothy to rebuke, correct, exhort with all long suffering and teaching, for the time will come when they will not endure sound doctrine. What is that sound doctrine, Pastor? Can you help me understand? Can you define that for us so that we can maintain it as ourselves, right? And so the reason why I ask that question is, for one, it goes directly to the heart of the issue that Paul, by the Holy Spirit, says is going to happen, that people who identify as I'm a follower of Christ are actually going to let go, abandon the law of God, because that's exactly what sound doctrine is in the scriptures. Mm-hmm. I mean, I can bring up Proverbs chapter 4, verse 2 and say, behold, I give you good doctrine. Do not forsake my law. I've had plenty of people say, oh, come on, Andrew, you're stretching that one. That's a father talking to the son, an earthly father talking to an earthly son. And I'm thinking, so this is sound doctrine for an earthly father and a son, but it's not good doctrine when the heavenly Father gives us instruction and we don't forsake it. Yeah. Really. So that's interesting to me. But also Paul says, and I believe it's 2 Timothy 1, or it's 1 Timothy 1, and he says that the law was not meant for the righteous, but for the unrighteous. And what he means by that is that the law was not meant to come down on the righteous, because the righteous are obeying it. And if they fall, they have an advocate with the Father, right? But the law was meant for the unrighteous to be condemned, right? To see where they fall short, to be condemned, and either come to the Savior or completely engulf themselves in lawlessness.
Right.
And so it's for the whoremongers, for the idolaters, for the kidnappers, right? And whatever else is contrary to sound doctrine. So he lists all
Right.
these being in breach of the commandments. He lists all these sins that are from the Torah, and he says, and anything else that's contrary to sound doctrine. So he's saying the law of God is sound doctrine, right? And I can go to plenty other places.
Right.
But this is what it really comes down to in this conversation with the pastors is I'm asking them what they believe is sound doctrine. And they might respond with, well, it's the gospel of Jesus. Okay, well, can you explain to me what the gospel is? Right.
Yeah.
And then that gives me another opening. What is the gospel? And they explain it. I say, okay, so what you're saying is the gospel teaches us that we should now live in holiness and righteousness according to the example of Christ, right? That we should actually abandon sin. You're right. Yeah, that's actually what Paul says in Titus chapter 2, right? That the grace of God has appeared to all men to teach us to deny ungodliness and worldly lust, that we should live soberly and righteously and godly in this present age, right? Looking for the blessed hope. And that he might redeem us from every lawless deed. That's the point of the grace of God coming to earth, is that he would redeem us from sin. What is sin?
Right.
Transgression of the law, right? We go through all these very basic principles is really what I'm trying to get down to, and try to just provoke some thought with these pastors, and also get their honest responses to these answers I'm giving them, right? And so you get to see that all unfold, right? And what's interesting about why I start out that way is once they agree that this is the law of God, and usually they will, right? I usually get them to agree, yeah, this is the commandments of God, it's the law of God.
Mm-hmm.
And then all of a sudden you ask them about certain commandments, they're starting to argue against it, right? And you're starting to see the contradiction all along. They agree what it is at first, and then you start to see them contradict themselves. And doesn't matter what is said after that. Once you start arguing against the commandment after you just agreed that that's what it is, you've lost the whole conversation, right? And so that should in and of itself spark some investigation for the pastor. But I just find it to be a very effective biblical way of going about these conversations, by the way, because I look at Nathan the prophet, right? And this is what I was actually going to mention earlier before I mentioned that. I've had people come to me and say, well, you should be a little bit more upfront with what you're saying, right? You should say, well, hey, I'm going to give a little bit of pushback, right? You might say this about, I'm a Sabbath keeper. I'm a Torah keeper, right? I keep the dietary instructions. I keep the feasts, and I know you don't. And that's kind of what I'm asking you about. And so I just want to make sure you're ready for that. And just expect a little pushback from me. Is that okay? I would almost guarantee 9.5 times out of 10, if not 10 times out of 10, you're going to get a no from that pastor for an interview, first of all.
Mm-hmm.
But also that's not necessary if you're trying to effectively bring about to show error, right? If you're effectively trying to show error in somebody, you don't just lay all your cards on the table. For example, Nathan the prophet goes to David, right? He doesn't go to David and say, "Hey, David, I just want to let you know, I'm against adultery and murder, right? And theft, and I'm about to ask you a question about some sheep and someone stealing sheep, just so you can get an understanding of what you did wrong." I might give you a little pushback. Okay, just be ready about that. I want you to have a bad reaction. So I'm just going to ask you some questions. And is that okay? Right? No, he didn't do that. He said, what do you think about this guy? Right? What do you think about this situation? And he got David's honest response, right? He said, oh man, that guy ought to be punished. Right?
Yeah.
Oh, he said, oh, you're the man.
You're the
man. And so that's the same vein that I'm actually going about with these interviews, is I'm actually showing them, oh, we're the ones when we argue against the commandments that have let go of sound doctrine. You're the man. You're the man.
Yeah.
Another example. And so this is not like trickery. This is not deception. This is an effective way of showing error in someone's life. Jesus did the same thing to the woman at the well, right? He went up to her. He said, go and get your husband. And did he know she had a husband? That she didn't have a husband? Of course he knew she didn't have a husband, and still said, go get your husband. And she said, oh, I don't have a husband. He says, yeah, you're right in saying that you don't have a husband. You've actually had 5 husbands, right? And the one you're with now is not your husband, and that you say truly. So he's actually showing her error by this initial question, a rhetorical question, by the way.
Right.
So same thing. That's where I get these examples from, of just going about this sound doctrine question that I already know the answer to, but I want to hear it from them.
Yeah, and I think that's a good way to go about gauging the health of the church. I definitely don't think you need to. I like your approach. I wouldn't go in and show all the cards on the table, but I wouldn't be dishonest with them either. You know what I mean? So I like the way that you do that.
Yeah, and like I said, if they asked me further questions, I would be happy to answer them, and I have before.
Yeah. So what do you think, percentage wise, like how often do you go to someone and compare that to how often you actually get to interview them?
Yeah, with the pastors,
and real quick, just kind of an inside thing, on, when you ask them and they say, well, give them the card and they'll call you back, right? There's a saying, it's callbacks are crawlbacks. So basically saying they're not going to call back, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah,
but
yeah.
So what kind of is that percentage there
with the
that you're getting
pastors?
feedback?
I would say it depends on where I'm at, but altogether, from the time I've been doing this, I would say 70% of the other pastors will actually have an interview with me.
Nice.
And one or two of them have actually been off camera, and I don't usually do that, but that they did say, but I would have it off camera, and so I did do that. So I don't like doing that again because I feel like they're trying to hide something. But if I'm feeling it out and it seems legitimate that they'd still want to talk, and maybe there's still some sowing seed sowing opportunities, then I'll take that opportunity. But I usually don't like to do that just because of what I've experienced in the past. When you have a conversation behind closed doors with most pastors, they'll agree with you that you'll even have a kind conversation most times, and then the next Sunday they're up there saying, hey, watch out for these people who are saying that you can't eat bacon, they're teaching doctrines of demons, stay away from them, I've had conversation with them and they're dangerous, stay away from them, don't even talk to them. So this kind of I don't want people to be made afraid because a pastor gets up there and says this is what you should be afraid of, because I remember being super passionate about the scriptures, pretty knowledgeable about the scriptures, and still being afraid from what these pastors were saying in regards to these commandments and keeping them. So if that can happen to somebody who actually is studying the scriptures on a daily basis, I know that a lot of Christians are not actually doing that, and I know that they're more susceptible to that.
Yeah.
But, no, that's good.
But I have the authority structure.
Right. But also not just pastors though that I talk to. Most of the time, the conversations that I have with people who are not pastors are off camera, and I've had so many good conversations that are off camera, a lot of them. So if I can get it on camera, I will, but I don't push people to be on camera. So.
Well, no, I do appreciate that dialogue that you're doing, because I think that's maybe something that's been lacking in the Torah community. So many, and I appreciate your compassion for these guys that aren't maybe not yet where we are, and and your grace and your kindness with them, because too many people in our movement want to draw up battle lines with folks, and part of that is because we go so far in, we leave modernity and in the Christianity world, and then we push back so hard, and we have church hurt, we have all these things, and we go so far the other way, and that we pretty soon we're condemning our own parents or our grandparents, maybe the people that gave us our very faith. If it weren't for my grandparents and my parents, I wouldn't have the faith. I mean, they birthed it in me, and I don't need to go attack them, but we tend to kind of swing that way, and it seems like so much of the modern Torah movement is a lot of arguing and strife and division, instead of I think these conversations are good to have with folks, even though sometimes it does elicit that kind of conversation from them, but that's on them, and that's what I really appreciate about your content, is how you remain calm, and that's hard to do. It's hard not to feel your blood pressure, start going up, and you can kind of feel the it's like the old cartoon. You can kind of feel that rising in your body and the steam pouring out your ears. And that kind of triggers that response in a lot of people. And so it's impressive that you remain cool, calm, and collected in those videos when people, follow you to your truck and they're still, still going on and on about this thing.
Yeah.
But I do think much needed conversations.
Yeah, and I think to that point, I think as a movement, I think, you really saw it start growing like 10, 15 years ago. And I think a lot of that is kind of behind us a little bit. I think we're maturing as a body a little bit on that because I know, like, individually, that's kind of how I've seen my walk is, initially when I'm immature in my faith, I would tend to get more heated in a discussion than when I'm more mature in my faith. And now it's, it's less offending when someone, doesn't see what I'm trying to say, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I think
go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, I was just going to add that it's a certain perspective. It's a biblical perspective that we have to have when we're having these conversations. It's that, one, it would be unreasonable to smack a blind man over the face, right?
Right.
You would look absolutely ridiculous for doing that. And so when people are not able to see some of the things that we're trying to promote and teach from the scriptures that we've been shown when we were once blind to these things, we need to have that compassion to them, that this is a blindness that the enemy has put over them. And so, we're to gently exhort them if perhaps God will grant them repentance and be able to to get out of the snare of the devil, right? And so that's one, right? And obviously we can see it's wisdom from the Proverbs that a soft answer turns away wrath. You can actually guide these conversations in most cases, right? And sometimes it doesn't work to have a soft tone, but you can actually guide these conversations to have a reasonable and a loving conclusion, a mutual understanding that we both respect each other, even though we may end up disagreeing at the end of this. At least they see that this man actually cared about me. Not that he just wanted to be right, not that he just wanted to tell me something because he thought he was better than me, but that he actually cares about this issue and cares about that I understand this issue. And so that's very important.
Yeah. No, that's good. Well, when you think about it and we really take a 1,000-foot view and you start looking through Torah and examining scriptures and you see the mercy and the kindness and the grace and the long suffering the Father had with his people from the beginning of time. And that's our standard. That's our model. And certainly we want him to be patient with us and overlook our wrongdoing. And we've got to be able to be that way with our brother. We've got to be, and that's hard. That's where the Torah really meets the road in so many regards. And just like what he said to the Pharisees, it's very easy to keep some of these physical commands like eating clean once you get into that. And once you get into keeping the Sabbath, those are easy. Keeping the feast. So those are so simple, so easy to do. And the hard stuff is your heart. The hard stuff is the forgiving your brother, being patient with being patient with your wife, your children, it's this household, the day to day, and how we spend our time. I think about my life and all the time, and so many of us are guilty of this, the consumption of the media, the consumption of time with your phone, it's kind of ridiculous. So, and we get sucked into these holes, and they can become idols. They distract us from our Father. But yeah, we got to have grace and compassion for our fellow man, because our Father certainly has with us.
Yes.
So. So something that really amazes me about what I've seen from you is how, and so Jake's kid had the same question. So he watches a lot of you. So you've got a fan out there, and a young preteen or teenager, teen, yeah. And so he enjoys it, and he and I both want to know, how did you commit all these scriptures to memory? What's your trick? What's your secret?
Well, I don't think it's a secret or it's a trick, but maybe a few reasons why I've been able to just recite scriptures off the top of my memory is, for one, you got to be familiar with the scriptures. You just have to read them, right? That's you have to do that if you're going to be able to memorize anything. You got to be able to read it first and foremost, and so you got to be not just read it, but read it all the time. And so another way that I've been able to memorize scripture so much is just writing it down. When I see some scriptures that stick out to me, or I think, wow, this is going to be really helpful in a conversation when this topic comes up, I will just write it down, right? And my wife, I have notebooks full of scriptures, and I used to have a bunch of pictures all over my walls of scriptures all over the place, and so it'd always be before me. I'd always just be looking at these scriptures and being able to memorize them. And so those are a couple ways that you could do that. Another way that I've been able to just recite scripture super well is having a conversation with people about these scriptures, right? When you talk about them, when you're actually using these tools to be able to help change somebody's life, to sow that seed, it's going to be way easier for you to do it for the next person, right? And so and just so on and so on. So build your repertoire of the scriptures that you think are going to be helpful for you to frame and form your message, right? Craft your message to relay to somebody else, right? And so I've just gained a lot of scriptures to be able to help me in these conversations with even the most basic topics.
Yeah, one of the things I find impressive watching your discussions is you'll get Yeah. So when one of the things that I found impressive is when you'll be in the middle of a conversation and you'll get cut off, kind of like what just happened with the recording. But then you'll just pick right back up and know right where you were in the verse and be able to complete the verse or, several verses of which you were talking about. That's pretty impressive.
Yeah, praise God. It's difficult because I have a trail that I try to go down. I try to bring people down, and I know that it can veer off sometimes. It can be interrupted, but I'm trying to bring people back on that trail, that train of thought that I was trying to bring them down. So
yeah, people like to kind of get off into the weeds there. One thing I was going to bring up, and I guess now is as good a time as any, is I find it very interesting when, like, in your discussions, you'll say something. They'll say something like, "Well, no, the law is a mirror to kind of show us, where we fall short, right?" And it's like, and I just want to yell at the screen. It's like, okay, so now that you've seen where you're falling short, we should not keep doing that, right? We should stop doing the falling short that we've been doing. You know what I mean? And that's one of the things that always, every time I watch, I'm like, geez.
yeah,
I just watch them like step into it, and they don't even see it coming.
Yeah, it's a weird thing because I have that same response internally, is like, yeah, so if you can see what the law shows you is wrong, then you don't want to do that anymore, right? It's kind of where the question it comes from for me. But
right,
I think it comes from also Ray Comfort's teachings, because I remember him saying, the law is a mirror, and you hold it up so people can see where they've fallen short, then you can go in with the gospel, right? And it makes perfect sense.
yeah.
But that's also his reason of why you don't keep the Sabbath, right? Well, it only shows you where you've fallen short, so you can come to the gospel. Once you have the gospel, you don't need the law anymore. But you don't say that about, lying and stealing and coveting. But why do you say it
Right.
about the Sabbath? It makes no sense to me. So it's just this weird thing that people say and they've heard that, and they think it makes sense, and it really doesn't. So
I think, like you were saying at the beginning, you have the platitudes, and some people are happy with the platitudes, and then some people like you, like I wasn't happy with the platitudes, and it makes you dig deeper. I think because you're like, well, that doesn't really answer the question. So then you go, now you're like, well, that didn't answer the question. Now I have something that I think Yah is telling me to seek out.
right.
Yeah, no, that's good. Jake, I think it's your turn. Maybe.
Okay. Number 7 there, I'll do. So where do you see holes in the body, or like where the body can kind of improve its message or its witness? That being the Torah community, not necessarily like normie church situation, because I can kind of see you're kind of exposing where the work there needs to be done. But as a Torah body, where do you see room for growth, or like what's kind of the state of the body, you think?
Yeah, I think the state is that we're all trying to do our best to figure out how to organize, right? A lot of different things. And within that, there comes all these different ideas and theories of what should be taught as accurate, sound doctrine. There's a lot of things that we agree on, right? And you know that. But
Mhm.
there's some things that we just can still divide over. And what's interesting is we're coming out of this Christianity, right? This mainstream Christian thought process, and still, even when we come out of this mainstream Christian church, right? In some ways, we bring a lot with us, and it's kind of similar to like the Martin Luthers, right? That they're trying to be reformed, and yet they still bring a lot of Catholicism with them. And so I think that's
Right.
what with the Torah community is they have a lot of these ideas that are still mainstream Christian thought processes that we can't fellowship if we disagree here, right? This is salvational, this is salvific, and if you disagree, then this is a problem. And so that's one thing. And where that stems from also is that we're learning all these different things, and we feel like we've been lied to, and we have all this knowledge that we're gaining, right? And we don't know what to do with it. And so we're throwing it at our fellow brothers who are also being enlightened, right? And we're just arguing amongst each other about these very lofty theories and ideas, when it's the people that are all around us, that whether they're in the church or not, that could just benefit so much and have a transformed life just from the very simple and simplistic and basic biblical principles that we've retained, that we could share with them, right?
Mhm.
And so really the problem is idleness. We're gaining all this knowledge, we're studying, and we're dealing with all these lofty ideas when we're doing absolutely nothing but arguing amongst each other about them. And if we could just actually go out and take action, take a risk, do something for the Lord, then I think we'd have a lot less time arguing amongst each other.
Yeah, I think in some ways I see a little bit of Gnosticism creeping in. It's what it feels like, this love of knowledge for knowledge's sake sometimes.
That's exactly what I was thinking too.
I see that definitely being a problem, and I think we can all. It's easy to go down that path. It's something you kind of got to be aware of because you can. The other thing, this week's Torah portion, we read the end of Genesis, and it lists all those tribes, and then again in Deuteronomy 22. And so I put those two together, where Joseph, Ephraim and Manasseh gets blessed, and Isaac crosses his hands and does that blessing and kind of gives this description of the tribes. And then you see it mirrored in Deuteronomy 22. And I think there's an interesting concept even in the tribal identity. When you think about each one of these tribes had a symbol, they had a flag, they had a banner, they kind of have their own identity, which should tell us there's room in the camp for this individuality. And so the Father knew we weren't all going to be the same. We weren't all going to get along and think the same thing. But none of us were there. We can't know how the individualized these tribes and families might have been back in at the beginning in there in the Torah, but it's kind of interesting to think about. I think there's a lot of room in the camp for tribes, and you don't have to divide and decide you're not brothers anymore. There's room in the camp for different ideas. Is kind of what I kept thinking in this week's Torah portion.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
I
that's a
think
good observation.
to your point as well, Andrew, I think, and the way Matt put, knowledge for knowledge's sake. And I think, when you come into this, your sword, right? The word of Yah, you're really just now gaining a sword, but you don't know how to use it. And you're just swinging it all over and hitting everybody with it, is kind of the analogy that kind of strikes my mind of, why there's always seems to be this discord within the body and towards others is because now we have this sword and we're just swinging it around like maniacs because we haven't been taught how to use this sword that we've got, because we're all kind of realizing it at the same time.
Yeah. That's so. There is a group that's just gaining knowledge and they're arguing with the wrong people, and they need to go out and just do something, right? I think it was Charles Spurgeon said something like, one good deed is worth more than 1,000 brilliant theories, right? Do something is what he was saying.
Yeah.
Stop just gaining all this knowledge for nothing.
Right.
Just go do something. So there is that camp, and then there's kind of the similar people that will do something, and they're actually doing more harm than good with that with that understanding, right? And so how to really wield that sword is so crucial. And I think we already touched on it, just getting that understanding, that wisdom to be gentle and patient with all men, to understand that they're blind. They can't see, just like you couldn't see these things at one point. And so those principles are super crucial for us to be able to understand before we go out and share with people, right? And how I'm supposed to be the example. If I'm the one who says that I believe I'm more accurately walking out discipleship in Christ, and therefore I'll be able to exemplify that a little bit better, then I should be able to have the same demeanor, tone, right? The same mercy and compassion that Christ displayed when he was on earth.
Those are discipleship principles also.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And I also think it's kind of forgotten sometimes in our movement about when you really start looking at basic Torah principles, and then you really examine your former walk and, maybe your people in your family and loved ones that that are in regular Christianity, they're doing Torah as well. And it just, they're checking a lot of the boxes, and they're, when you boil it all down, there's just a handful really of things that you're doing different than them. But for a great majority, Jake and I did a series one time called Christians Follow Torah. And we kind of went through all those things, like, no one is saying, you should, we should have bestiality. I mean, there's all kinds of topics like that everyone goes, yeah, no, we're not doing that and not practicing that, not. And so there's a ton of commonality. And I think that we need to be reminded of that sometimes and realize that they're following Torah as well. It's just and bottom line is nobody's doing it perfect.
Right.
And so that's something to that we kind of forget sometimes, I think, and we need to be reminded that we're not perfect at this either.
Yeah, and kind of to your point too, Andrew, about in the memorizing scriptures, we'll try to bring us back around here. In your memorizing scriptures, the having conversations with people, I found was very key. If the verses you're studying aren't useful, it's going to be harder to remember them. And so like in my case, early on, so this is kind of the balance. You had mentioned, it early on, maybe not being like teaching and all this stuff. Like my early on conversations really solidified what I actually believed about this, because it gave me the chance to test what I was learning against actual like pushback, and I think there's a good way to do that. I don't know necessarily the right way, because like in my case, it was at a Bible study at work was the majority of my conversation with this, and it didn't always go smoothly, but I think I was meant to learn something through that. So there's kind of a fine line of dissuading people from going out there with what you're learning, but also you have to kind of bounce that off of something,
Right.
and test it.
Yeah, I guess the best way that if anybody is having that similar struggle that we all had, right? How do I go about this? Is really just stick to the basic train of thought or trail of just asking them questions and letting them respond, right? And just starting that like, hey, we've been working for a while. I just wondered, like, you grew up around here, right? Oh yeah, we grew up around here, been living here for a while. Like, okay, so like are you like a Christian, or are you atheist? Like, what are you? Like, that's a pretty big jump, but it's like a simple question, and
the direction you're headed anyway.
Right. To like see where this conversation is going to go. It's just from a question, and it's not an offensive question because you're asking them about them, right? It's most people's favorite topic, right? Just asking them about themselves. So it's super non-confrontational, and that's how you could start a really good relationship as well. Just asking someone about themselves, and you can ask them further questions based upon how that conversation goes. That's the easiest way I found to do it.
Oh yeah, and my background is sales, and there's a lot of techniques like that in sales, and they work because and it's also important to let people answer the question. Don't answer all the questions. Don't define everything. Just wait, pause, really listen, see what they say, and then decide what you say next based upon what objection or whatever it is that they say. And I think that's why sometimes, especially when we're new in Torah, we do what a new sales guy does. He shows up and he throws up. And so he's excited and he's just peppering them with this information, and they're like, whoa, too much. And we've all done that. I have to ask you, where did you get the sizzling bacon tracts?
I made them.
Okay.
Yeah.
So tell us about those. You sell those? If somebody wanted those, what would they do?
Yeah, I sell them on Etsy. It's just a really, I guess I could make my own website and do it that way, but I find it to be easier to just give them a little bit of a profit. It's not much, and they just deal with the orders for me, and they'll let me know that I got an order, and we package them up and we send them out. And they're I think they're $10 for 20, and I've seen the tracts and the Torah movement, and they're really expensive actually. And so I think if someone finds some cheaper ones, you let me know. But I think I have the cheapest tracts in the Torah movement for getting this message out. But I learned a little something from Ray Comfort, right? I learned a lot from Ray Comfort. But one of the things is to have some sort of interactive feature to your tracts it can be key, right? And so one of the things that is interactive here, first of all, the message is super biblical, right? It's the layout, some people have said it might be hard to read. I haven't found that. Maybe it's hard to read for some people, but all in all, it's never going to be perfect for everybody. So I've given these out so many. I give them out all the time. I'll leave them in grocery stores, in the bacon aisles, right?
Yeah, that's perfect.
Yeah, I'll leave them all over the place, and so I'll give them to people and be like, "Hey, can I give you one of these?" And they'll reach and they'll take it, and then they'll sit down at the bench, and I'll watch them read it for 5 minutes, and I'm like, okay, they're actually reading it, right? And then they'll move to the front of the track, and they'll do that because this is another answer to the question of why there's bacon on here. First of all, it gets their minds thinking about the topic of bacon, right? And also it's like, oh, bacon, that's fun, right?
Yeah,
and so they'll
bacon.
take it.
Yeah,
everybody loves bacon, right? And so, but when they read this, they read on the back, and it says, the Bible calls, sin can seem innocent, But just like the front of this tract, we don't always see the devil in the details at first. However, when we take a closer look, we see the devil has been there all along. And so it says, find the devil hidden on the front of this tract. And so they got to look for the word devil on the front of this tract. And so it's fun, right? They're like, let's see if I can find it. And it's a little difficult. I used to be a lot easier to find that word, and everybody said it's too easy to see. You can see it right away. So I made it a little bit lighter, and so it's a little bit harder to see. And so I want to be able to give the tools to help people to share this message and spark revival wherever they are. And we've put the work in to develop this very fun, packed full of information tract, and it works really well for me. And so I wanted to offer that to other people. I'd ship it all over the place for free, but I'd have to pay a lot of money for shipping, and also it would,
you can't do that.
It'd be staying pretty busy for not worth much for me to do that. So
right,
yeah, but I'm sure if someone listening to this feels behooved to move, they could help you with that. I'm sure they could help fund that for people that can't afford it on their own. I'm sure that would be a gift somebody could arrange with you and help people to do it. So we're going to put a link.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Put a link. Yeah, we'll put a link to that in the YouTube description as well, so you can purchase those.
Yeah, I was going to say that you get about 20 of these for free when you become any tier of a Patreon supporter. So we'll send you those for free as a way to say thank you, and any tier on the YouTube membership as well.
Okay,
that's awesome.
Good deal. And I'm putting that up there so we can find you. You've got a Facebook presence. You can be found there. You've got the Patreon as well, and then you've got this YouTube channel, and then I showed the Etsy page there that you've got too. So we encourage you to go check it out, support it. Looks like, do you have T-shirts there too, or is that someone else?
I don't. I have
just an ad, I guess.
I don't have any T-shirts right now, but I might have some next year. I'm looking around. Like I said, we packed up and moved today, so I can't see anything. But yeah, shirts might be coming. But also, I just wanted to clarify, it might not be every tier on YouTube members. I might have misspoke on that one, so I'll have to double check. But some tiers on the YouTube membership gets free tracks.
All right. Well, good deal. Well, Jake, I think we're coming to the end. Is there anything else that you wanted to say or ask?
No, just let us know what you have planned for the future. Your next stops, your next endeavors, what we can look forward to from outside the camp coming up. Do you have anything in the hopper?
Yeah, so I'm actually working on some footage from our last Huntington Beach pier visit. We did another visit to the pier. It's just a great place to go and do evangelism. So I know in the video I'd mentioned to somebody, I'm not going to be back here, so I can give you my email address and we can chat a little bit more if you wanted to. But the route has been changed, as it has by the Father many times, and so we're able to spend a little bit more time here around Huntington Beach. We're about an hour and a half to 2 hours away from Huntington Beach Pier, so it's a little bit of a hike, but it's worth going down there to do what we're doing here. So every opportunity I can, I'm going to try to get down there as many times as I can, y'all willing. So pray for that. And if you're around the area and you want to come down and assist and help with some equipment, or you want to pass out tracts or whatever, I'll give you a fat stack of tracts and you can go pass them around the pier and try to help them to come have a conversation with me. I don't think anybody needs any help, because the sign does a pretty good job of attracting people to come chat with me. But yeah, I'm sure the more the merrier to be out there doing evangelism with me. It's going to be a big blessing. So
yeah, that's awesome. And I do encourage everyone to go watch this last video that you did. That was really good. It's interesting because what a interesting people watching experience. Just watching this video, I get hung up sometimes by watching people in the background and stuff. I'm like, whoa, it's just such a interesting mix of people. You see people from all over the world, all kinds of walks of life, and not to mention, you can tell that this is a pleasant place to be. The weather's great, and you're on the beach. It seems like a pretty good place to be.
Yeah, it's a perfect spot to do evangelism. I can see why Ray Comfort goes out there to do his videos. I think he lives around the area, so I think he goes down there all the time. Actually, that was one of the reasons why I meant to go down there in the first place. This was actually the backup plan to do evangelism, was to do this. But I actually wanted to go down there to meet with Ray Comfort and ask him some questions about the Sabbath and whatnot. And so I went down there 2 weekends in a row, the days that he said he was going to be down there, and I didn't see him. He never showed up. So I just did that. And so I
Yeah.
probably would have done that anyways if I would have spoke with him, but it was very fruitful. So pray that I'm able to meet with Ray Comfort, because I might bump into him a few more times.
Yeah,
as I try
yeah,
to
you
find him.
sure might. Someone out there listening might have a connection. You never know. So if
Potentially.
you do share it with him. Share it with Mr. Comfort. So Andrew, you have anything else you want to share or say before we get off with you? I know we've kept you here for a minute.
No, I appreciate the invite, and it was a blessing to be able to chat with you, brothers.
Well, great. Well, we appreciate your time and talking to us, and we encourage you to go check out Andrew on all the places, all the things, subscribe, like all the things. Please share it with friends and family and everybody you know. And we do have to mention one thing. We just recently talked to the folks over at Whole Bible Community, and that's what I'm showing here. And that's a great place to be. So you can find people that you can connect with, and it's a great place to find connections. And we encourage you to check that out if you get a second. Anyway, I think that's about all I have. What about you, Jake?
Yeah, just tune in next week. Check out Sabbath Lounge. We have interviews, we got some teachings out, we got some all kinds of stuff in there, Torah portions, studies, all the things. So we have different interviews, obviously, different conversations we've had with people, so different apologetic type things. So like and subscribe and share it with your friends and family.
That's all right. Yep. Thank you. Well, Andrew, thank you so much for your time. If you'll stick around just for a minute when we sign out, and we'll make sure we get everything squared away before we go. All right.
Sure.
Well, thank you guys for listening. This is Matt
And Jake
signing out.